Did you know that the foundation of the Catholic Church might not be what you were always taught? You may have been told that it began with a man named Peter, the apostle of Jesus. But what if I told you that the real story is much deeper and in some aspects even contradictory? What you are about to discover might change not just your understanding of religion, but of history itself. Who decided that Peter should be the leader of the church? Was it Jesus directly, or was it a later agreement among his followers? Imagine this: a group of scattered, persecuted men meeting in secret and laying the foundations of what would become one of the most powerful institutions in the world. How likely is it that all this emerged from a single moment or a single person? The answer might surprise you. Think about this for a moment. The Catholic Church, which today has more than 1 billion faithful, began amid oppression and chaos. Rome was a hotbed of political power, the worship of pagan gods, and the constant threat of persecution. The followers of Christ not only struggled for their faith, but also to survive in a hostile world. How did they go from being a marginalized group to becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire? This wasn't a stroke of luck, much less a miracle. It was a carefully woven strategy. Let me tell you something you probably never heard before. The Catholic Church did not come into being overnight, nor was it the result of a direct divine mandate. It was the product of decades, even centuries, of human decisions. From its early clandestine meetings to the councils that defined its doctrines, each step was marked by conflicts, debates, and sometimes decisions that challenged the original teachings of Christ. What motivated these men? Faith, power, or a mixture of both? Let's explore this together. The Apostle Peter, known as the first pope, played a central role. But did he really think about establishing a church? The scriptures tell us that Jesus said, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." But is that enough to affirm that Peter was the founder? What did Jesus mean by church? A building, an institution, or something completely different? The words of Jesus have been interpreted in such different ways that they have caused divisions over the centuries. Here's the striking part: the Bible never mentions a Catholic Church per se. In fact, the term Catholic, meaning universal, didn't appear until years after the apostles' deaths. It was Ignatius of Antioch, around the year 107 after Christ, who first used this word to describe the Christian community. So if the original apostles didn't use this term, who decided the church should be called that, and why? To understand this, we need to go back and analyze the early years of Christianity. Imagine a revolutionary movement led by fishermen, tax collectors, and outcasts, trying to spread a message that went against the cultural and religious norms of the time. The persecution was brutal. Christians were executed in Roman arenas, deemed heretics and enemies of the state. How did this marginalized group go from being hunted to gaining the favor of emperors? This is where Constantine the Great comes into play. Constantine's conversion to Christianity in the 4th century was a turning point. But wait, don't think it was purely an act of faith. Constantine was a strategist, a man who understood the power of religion to unify a fractured empire. In the year 313 after Christ, he issued the Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity and ended the persecutions. However, his interest in religion wasn't entirely altruistic. Could it be that he used Christianity as a political tool to consolidate his power? The foundation of the Catholic Church, as we know it today, began to take shape at the Council of Nicaea in the year 325. Here, Christian leaders met under Constantine's supervision to debate fundamental questions. Was Jesus completely divine, completely human, or a mix of both? These decisions not only defined Christian theology, but also laid the foundations for an institution that would dominate politics, culture, and spirituality for centuries. But make no mistake, this was not a clean or orderly process. There were betrayals, internal disputes, and in some cases, violence. Many Christians who disagreed with the decisions made at these councils were persecuted by their own brethren. Can you believe that the same followers of Christ, who had once been persecuted by the Romans, began to persecute each other? This shows that the creation of the Catholic Church was not just a matter of faith, but also of power and control. And here arises a disturbing question. How much of what we consider Catholic today truly comes from the original teachings of Jesus, and how much was shaped by political and human decisions over the following centuries? This is not a critique, but an invitation to reflect. Have you ever wondered why certain doctrines are the way they are, or why certain books were included in the Bible while others were discarded? The answers to these questions might surprise you more than you imagine. This story is far from over, and what comes next delves even deeper into the mysteries and challenges that defined the early centuries of Christianity. Are you ready to continue this journey and discover truths hidden in plain sight? Did you know that some key early Christian texts were almost lost forever? Many people don't realize that before the Bible as we know it was compiled, there were dozens of Gospels, letters, and accounts competing to define the Christian faith. Now imagine this: Christian leaders from different parts of the Roman Empire, each with their own ideas and traditions, gathering to decide which writings would be considered the Word of God and which would be discarded or even condemned. Who were these people, and what criteria did they use to make such significant decisions? The answer is part political, part theological, and completely surprising. What happened in the early centuries of Christianity was not a simple selection based on spirituality. It was an ideological battle that determined which version of the faith would prevail. Did you know there were Christians who believed in a completely different God from the one we know today? Groups like the Gnostics saw faith in a radically different way. They believed that secret knowledge, not blind faith, was the key to connecting with the divine. Some even thought the God of the Old Testament was an inferior, tyrannical figure, different from the loving Father that Jesus taught about. Imagine the impact if those ideas had triumphed. The Council of Nicaea, which we mentioned earlier, not only aimed to define who Jesus was, but also to silence these dissenting voices. Many texts considered heretical were deliberately destroyed. Some only came to light centuries later, such as the Gnostic Gospels discovered in Nag Hammadi in 1945. These texts offer a completely different view of the early years of Christianity, one in which diversity of thought was the norm rather than the exception. What happened to eliminate that diversity? And more importantly, what does this mean for the faith we know today? Let's talk about Peter and his supposed primacy in the Church. While Catholic tradition holds that he was the first pope, historical evidence is much more ambiguous. In the Book of Acts, Peter plays an important role, but is never described as the absolute leader. In fact, at the Council of Jerusalem, a key event in early Christianity, it seems that James, the brother of Jesus, held a more prominent position. So where does the idea that Peter was the rock upon which the Church was founded come from? This is where a mix of theological interpretation and institutional construction comes into play. Can you imagine that one of the Church's pillars might be based more on tradition than on direct historical evidence? Another intriguing aspect is the role of Rome. Why did it become the center of Christianity when Jesus lived and died in Jerusalem? The answer is deeply rooted in Roman imperial politics. Rome was not only the empire's capital, but also a symbol of universal power. By establishing its base there, the Catholic Church sought not only spiritual authority, but also political legitimacy. This explains why the early popes worked hard to consolidate their power in the city and extend their influence to other regions. But it wasn't a smooth path. The development of the Catholic Church was filled with internal conflicts. Did you know there were times when up to 3 different people claimed to be the legitimate pope simultaneously? These episodes, known as the Western Schism or the Three Popes Crisis, are a reminder that the Church, although divine in its ideals, has always been made up of human beings with ambitions and weaknesses. How did they reconcile these power struggles with the message of humility and service preached by Jesus? That is a question that continues to spark debate today. Finally, consider the impact of Constantine's conversion to Christianity. Although he officially adopted the faith, he maintained pagan practices until the end of his life. He was even baptized on his deathbed, which has led many to question whether his conversion was genuine or merely a political act. What do you think? Do you believe a strategist like Constantine would adopt Christianity purely out of faith, or did he use it as a tool to unify a divided empire? What is clear is that thanks to him, Christianity went from being a persecuted faith to a favored religion, something that forever changed the course of history. Now let's return to a key question: who really created the Catholic Church? While Peter and the apostles laid the foundations, it was the councils, emperors, and leaders of later generations who shaped it. It was a long process, filled with difficult decisions, political compromises, and internal struggles. But this does not diminish the greatness of what they achieved. The Catholic Church, with all its flaws and contradictions, has shaped the history, culture, and spirituality of billions of people. Finally, I want to leave you with a reflection. The Catholic Church, as we know it today, is not just the product of one moment or one person, but the result of centuries of evolution, struggle, and faith. It reminds us that even the greatest and most powerful institutions have their roots in the dreams, doubts, and decisions of human beings like you and me. What do you think? Now that you know all this, do you believe the Church is more divine, more human, or a perfect mixture of both?